is Brian Young, and I'm the chair of Transition Salt Spring. I am pleased to welcome you to an all candidates forum for the 2022 local government elections happening across BC on Saturday, October the 15th. For information on how to vote, please refer to the Islands Trust and CRD websites. For your convenience, we're also going to be putting the appropriate links in the chat window. We'll be using that chat window a lot this evening, so please become comfortable with it. We're very excited to be co-hosting this event with Salt Spring Solutions, and I'm really pleased to welcome my colleague and the co-chair of Salt Spring Solutions, Elizabeth Fitzallen, to join me in helping our candidates and viewers navigate tonight's event.
Thank you very much, Brian. On behalf of everyone at Salt Spring Solutions, I'm delighted to be here tonight. Salt Spring Solutions is a registered nonprofit society. We're volunteer run, composed of islanders who care about protecting the incredible natural environment of our island home while ensuring we maintain a vibrant, diverse, and fair community for all. We promote dynamic solutions to the interconnected issues of ecosystems protection, social equity, climate action, all within our rural island context. Some of you will know us through our coordination and advocacy for the Sailor Sea Trail and active transportation, or as a champion for workforce housing solutions. Much of our energy recently has been focused on leading the community campaign to acquire 75 acres of forest on Humatsum or Mount Maxwell, also as a community park. We have secured about 1.6 million for the acquisition and are working hard to raise the last 150,000 before Halloween. So you might see me again in that, wearing that hat. But tonight I'm really happy to be here with Transition.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful project, Elizabeth. That's really great. And Transition Salt Spring, not to be confused with Transitions. People often do that. And that's an awesome, awesome secondhand shop I go to often that's operated by Islanders working against violence. We are a registered charity, so are they, but we do not sell clothes, although we love their mission. Our mission is to respond to climate change, restore ecosystems, and rebuild community together. Last year, we published a climate action plan for Salt Spring that's available on the website. That address will be in the chat window. Everything we do is derived from this plan. Our activities focus on climate action related public education and projects like our Climate Action Coach program and our work with the North Salt Spring Waterworks District in the Humetson or Maxwell Creek watershed. Now, just a reminder that this event is being recorded. As you know, when you logged on, you probably got that consent request and will be shared on the Transition Salt Spring website in the elections section we have there within a few days of tonight's event. After we do just a minor editing just to tighten it up. The link where it will be posted is, as you guessed it, in the chat window, which you can open by accessing, for most of you at least, the bottom of your screen. You should see a chat window if you're on a PC or a laptop. Over to Elizabeth.
Yeah, we'd also like to note that your video and audio have been muted for this event. We will mute the chat function for all, but the host while the candidates are answering the questions. The chat is open now and we open again at the last part of the meeting tonight. You will be able to speak with our support team directly, however, at any time. Also, you will have a better viewing experience if you go to the view button on the upper left corner of your laptop or desktop Zoom interface, then select speaker view instead of gallery view. That will help you look deep into the eyes of the candidates as they're speaking to you.
Absolutely. And before we get going tonight, I would very much like to welcome Natasha Kong, Transition Salt Springs Communications Lead, to offer a land acknowledgement in these basically 2 days before the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation that's happening across Canada, Friday, September 30th.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, Elizabeth, and everyone joining us tonight. My name is Natasha Kong, and I'm a first-generation occupier of color of Hakka, Chinese, Jamaican, and Scottish ancestry. I'm born on the traditional territories of the Musqueam First Nations. Like many of us on the call, I'm joining from the unceded territories of the Hulkaminam and Sanchothan speaking peoples. I share this verbal land acknowledgement with the understanding that accountability and commitment to action are key components in acknowledgement. In that vein, and with Truth and Reconciliation Day coming this Friday, I'd love to share my humble beginnings on the road towards action. A few days ago, I attended a talk that Chief Robert Joseph gave about his latest book, Namoyat. Chief Joseph is a member of the National Assembly of First Nation Elders Council and a residential school survivor. He spoke to the importance of embracing reconciliation as a core daily value. He is currently the ambassador for Reconciliation Canada, which has this handy little tool called the Back Pocket Reconciliation Action Plan. I wonder if Erin can help me share the screen, and I'd like to share my Back Pocket Reconciliation Plan with you. This is by no means a prescriptive or comprehensive outline or plan. This is simply just a humble beginning. I'd love to hear what others are doing, and the chat is open at the moment, and I welcome for you to share what actions or steps you're taking or would like to take in the future or are taking maybe now. So while folks are taking a moment to think on their actions, I'd like to share with you a quote from Chief Robert Joseph. "It is my belief that we wouldn't be talking about reconciliation at all in Canada if it weren't for the courage, bravery, and dignity of residential school survivors. If it hadn't been for residential school survivors having the courage, having the dignity to stand up and recount and hold the government to account for that history, we wouldn't be talking about residential schools at all. This history would be lost and invisible today as it was 20 years ago. So I believe reconciliation is a gift. I believe reconciliation was something that was given to Canada by residential school survivors so that our country could have an opportunity to heal itself." He goes on to speak to reconciliation not being about one side or the other for Indigenous or non-Indigenous people, but that it's for the best interests of the larger collective humanity. So with this gift of reconciliation in mind, I'd like to call on us to collectively think on the actions that we may take on September 30th and beyond. Again, I'd like to acknowledge and recognize that many of us are here on the unceded land of the Holman and Tsimshian speaking peoples, land that has been witness to their stories of their ancestors and descendants since time immemorial. Thank you, Aichkasiem. And before we start, I'd like to also take a brief moment, a few seconds here to think on the Canadians on the East Coast. So just a moment of silence to think on all those who are picking up the pieces after Hurricane Fiona. So just a moment of silence here. Thank you, everyone.
You're muted, Brian.
So there we go. Classic. Everyone has to do it at one meeting. Thanks very much, and Haishka, Natasha, for that. That was really wonderful. Climate change, storms, increasing fire risks, housing unaffordability, inappropriate development, increasing social disparities, governance, all are big problems our island community is facing together. Too much is at stake right now for us to be arguing and not hearing one another as these issues stare us in the face. Some pretty radical acts of listening need to happen if we're to live in peace as a community, so that we can find a path to solutions in a way that balances those strong convictions with deep listening and compassion. With climate change, we know what we need to do. It's political will and public consensus that are lacking. The same is true the world over. It's on the people side where we need to do the work to help us see the beauty in each of our respective visions, build a common path, and move on to solutions that benefit all of us. Transition Salt Spring will be active in our community, working with you to help us build our collective abilities, our collective muscle to listen and create consensus in the months to come.
So tonight is another step towards working better together as a community by encouraging reflection, listening, understanding, collaboration, and inspired leadership. We come from different backgrounds, cultures, life experiences, and each look at the world through our own unique lens. We cannot expect to agree on all issues all the time. Brian and I don't agree all the time. Our organizations don't always agree on all issues, and even internally on our own boards, there's things that we don't align on. But we share fundamental values and a desire to find commonality and constructive ways to move forward together. We care deeply about this special island, its ecosystems and people. We believe in our community's capacity to navigate complexity and find local solutions to ecological crisis and social inequity and all the other things we need to deal with.
Well said, Elizabeth. Thank you very much. Now, a reminder to everyone that the Driftwood and the Salt Spring Forum are hosting the second other public opportunity to meet the candidates at an election debate that's going to be happening at Art Spring on Thursday, October the 6th, between 7 and 9 p.m. Please attend if you can. It's free and no tickets are required. No pesky registration links or Zoom hiccups or anything like that. You can just go on in. And over to you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, just another reminder that we're not focusing on candidates for the school district tonight. Several candidates have put their names forward for these important positions. Candidate profiles are available on the Salt Spring Exchange and in the Driftwood. A listing of the candidates is also available through the link Erin Ann has posted to the chat. Right there, I see it. So go check that out. Those are also important roles. We're just not covering it tonight.
For those of you just joining us, the chat will be very active with some of these links before we get going with the candidate answers to the questions. But a challenging fact of life on Salt Spring and on the other islands within the Islands Trust area is that we have a unique system of local governance, and that might be the polite word for some of you. Because it is different, people often don't fully understand what the Islands Trust and the CRD actually do and what services they provide us. So given that we'll be electing representatives to these bodies in October, we wanted to invite respected planner and ex-Islands Trust Chief Administration Officer Linda Adams to give us a short primer on the roles of the CRD and the Islands Trust with a focus on Salt Spring. Linda was also lead author on the Transition Salt Springs Land Use and Settlement Patterns chapter in the Climate Action Plan, which is available on our website, which we released last year. Welcome, Linda, and thank you very much for agreeing to help us out tonight.
Thank you, Brian. Now I just, hopefully I'm sharing my screen.
We can see it clear as day. We can't quite see you yet, but that might be a limitation of the technology. So please go ahead.
Yeah, you don't need to see me. So thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks to all the community members who put their name up for election, and to all of you who are here tonight participating in our community just by being here. I've been asked to give a very brief overview of local government in 10 minutes. So I'm going to try and do that, and it's going to be quick. So hang on to your hats as we go through this. I will be available in the chat later to answer questions where I can. I'm just starting with a slide that gives you a little bit of context. This slide shows the hierarchy of government in Canada and the relationships of local governments to the provincial and federal government in Canada. So just kind of starting from the top, the Canadian Constitution sets out the role of the federal and provincial governments, and it tells provincial governments that they have the responsibility of creating local governments and giving them certain powers and duties. It's important to remember that our local governments are created by the province, and so their powers only come from the province, and they can only do the things that are assigned to them. So the next slide here is just to give a really overview of the sort of typical responsibilities of the 3 levels of government in Canada. So we can sort of see at the top the typical things that our federal government would get involved in that the provinces and local governments don't have responsibilities for. So things like defense and foreign affairs. And then the next row down, we see the provincial government has responsibilities for things that happen at the provincial level, and local governments do the things that we call local matters, things like planning and development and providing for utilities and transit and libraries and parks and recreation. Provincial governments in Canada create local governments, as I mentioned, and they describe their duties in things like provincial acts. So just drilling down into BC, the provincial government has used its powers to create local government, and it's created 4 different types of local government in our province. We've got municipalities like cities and districts, towns and villages. We have regional districts, we've got the Islands Trust, and we've got improvement districts. So those are the main forms of local government that we have in British Columbia. And their duties and their powers and their responsibilities are all described in legal documents such as the Local Government Act and the Community Charter and the Islands Trust Act and letters patent for each of the local governments. Just one little wrinkle, because we're in unincorporated areas, some of our local services in quotes are actually provided by the province. So a good example of that is that our province owns the roads on our island and is responsible for planning them and maintaining them. And we also get our policing through the province, who has a contract with the RCMP. Just to drill down now a little bit into our local situation, we have 3 of the BC forms of local government on Salt Spring Island. Most of our local government services are provided by the Capital Regional District, which is what we would call a general purpose form of local government that's able to offer a wide range of services. On the other hand, the Islands Trust and our improvement districts are both special purpose forms of local government, and they provide specific services here. Local general elections that we're interested in for this meeting are going to be on October 15th, and they're for the representatives for the Capital Regional District and the Islands Trust that's shown in the yellow lettering. Our elections for improvement districts will be held at other times. This slide shows the 27 regional districts of BC and how we fit into that picture. Pretty well everywhere in the province is in one of these 27 regional districts. They're all made up of a combination of municipalities and unincorporated areas which work together to provide local services within their region. And you can see we're in CRD at the bottom of the screen, bottom of Vancouver Island. This is a close-up of the Capital Regional District. It includes 13 municipalities and 3 unincorporated areas called electoral areas, of which Salt Spring is one. Regional districts can offer a whole variety of different local services within their area to the degree that the province permits and the electors are willing to fund. In our area, the Capital Regional District doesn't do land use planning or regulation because the province has delegated those particular powers to the Islands Trust instead. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. This slide just shows you the main services that the CRD provides on Salt Spring Island. And so that means our elected CRD representative that we're going to be voting for in October makes decisions that affect all of these different services that we get from the CRD, or they provide advice to the CRD board on our behalf about these different topics. The CRD, because it is a general purpose type of local government, could add to this list if permitted by the province and if electors are willing to support the related taxes that would be needed to deliver additional services. Although this is, as you can see, quite a long list of different things that the CRD is already providing on Salt Spring Island. So who will we be electing? We're going to elect one electoral area director to influence and guide all those local matters, and they will sit on the CRD board of directors. That's a 24-member body made up of 3 electoral area directors and 21 municipal directors. So we will be electing our representative to that board. They're elected at large by residents and property electors for a 4-year term. And they will also sit on the CRD Electoral Area Committee that is just the 3 electoral area directors, and they make decisions about how services are provided to the electoral area committee. They will swear an oath to carry out their duties and related to the CRD's mandate and responsibility. And they'll automatically also have a seat on the Capital Regional Hospital District Board that makes decisions about some hospital equipments and costs and regional health facilities, along with the Island Health Authority. And they'll automatically sit on the Capital Regional Housing Corporation Board, which provides affordable housing across the region, and they may be appointed to some other CRD committees as well. So just moving now to the Islands Trust. As I mentioned, this is a special purpose form of local government that was created in 1974 to give an extra level of protection to over 470 islands in the Southern Gulf Islands area. As mentioned, in the rest of BC, land use planning and regulation would be carried out by municipalities or regional districts, but within our area, it's the responsibility of the Islands Trust. Trustees swear an oath to carry out those duties and to recognize the overall mandate of the Islands Trust. Who are we going to be electing? We will elect 2 trustees at large again, meaning the whole island votes together for them, by residents and property electors. They will sit for a 4-year term, and they will be members of 2 different bodies. First, they will sit on the 3-member Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee that makes all our local land use decisions. And they will also be members of a separate body, the Islands Trust Council, which has 26 members and makes broader decisions about the whole Islands Trust area. Just important to note, the Salt Spring Island or the Islands Trust Council doesn't make our local land use decisions, and it can't overrule the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee. And just to drill down a little bit more about the kind of decisions the Salt Spring Island trustees will make. This is the Salt Spring Island Local Trust area, just shown on the right of the screen. It isn't just Salt Spring Island. There's also 25 other smaller islands that the trustees will be responsible for and will represent. They will create, adopt, and amend the official community plan for Salt Spring Island and for those other islands. There's several community plans actually when you include the other islands. They also get into creating, adopting, and amending land use regulations and make decisions about applications that people bring to them about changing land use, all within the context of the Islands Trust mandate of preserving and protecting the environment. And lastly, just a little bit more, the impact of the decisions affect our island settlement patterns, the density and type of development we see. This is a picture of an area in Gagne, as you can see at the bottom, with commercial and multifamily development. And there's an undeveloped area or less developed area on the top of the screen. That's not an accident. That's a settlement pattern is due to the decisions that are made about zoning by the Salt Spring Island Local Trust Committee. So you can see this is an important role. And just that was a super quick summary of how local government is organized on Salt Spring Island and the types of decisions that the people we elect will make on our behalf. I put up a couple of things here to say why local government elections are important. And thanks to everyone for being involved by attending and participating in this meeting. That's it for me. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, sorry, that's me. I was waiting for Brian. Thank you very much, Linda. That was great. All candidates were invited to attend this evening's event. The candidates you see before you are those who agreed to attend. So I think we have everyone, right? Yeah, everyone's here.
Yeah, except,
yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone's here. Absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for being here. In attendance tonight in alphabetical order, starting with candidates for CRD Director are Jesse Brown, Kylie Coates, and Gary Holman.
And as for the candidates for the Islands Trust, local trustees, we have with us tonight Ben Corno, Gary Gagne, Jamie Harris, Don Marcotte, Jenny Mclean, Laura Patrick, and Elisa Poole. Note that tonight our questions do not explicitly address the important referendum question we're all going to have an opportunity to vote on regarding the formation of something called a local community commission. Information on this issue and information to help you make your decision as well can be found at lccsaltspring.com. That link will be posted in the chat window.
We have made public the 4 questions we are asking the candidates tonight. We did this in order to give the candidates the opportunity to develop more thoughtful responses to these complex questions. The candidates will have 2 minutes each to answer each of the 4 questions. Brian and I have clocks installed on our screens that will allow us to see the time remaining. We will remind the candidates when they have 30 seconds left. A different speaker order for each question was decided in advance by lottery with the consent of the candidates. Note that the host will interrupt candidates if they are not responding to the question. As a reminder, please do check the chat window regularly tonight for resources referenced by Brian or I as part of the event. And due to the number of candidates and the format of this event, there will not be time for audience questions, unfortunately, but we invite you to talk to the candidates and their bios and contact information where available are visible on the Transition Salt Spring website and on the Salt Spring Exchange and in the Driftwood, which has been publishing candidates' profiles for the past few weeks, and I think we'll get through everybody. Erin Ann has a link to the bios in, you guessed it, the chat window, so please check there.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. And just a reminder that everyone's chat function will soon be muted, except to chat with the host, us, or our technical team, which consists of Erin Ann. So we will be busy, but if you're having a technical issue, we can try to help you. The speaking order for question number 1 is also going to be posted in the chat and was chosen by lottery in advance and with the consent of the candidates, as Elizabeth stated. And you'll also see the question in the chat as well. There's some context I'll read out now. So for the first question, it's on the theme of overcoming community division. Many of us are aware of a growing polarization amongst many islanders, despite what seem to be shared concerns about our island's future. People who care deeply about this place and its people often find themselves cast into opposing and seemingly irreconcilable camps, resulting in a lack of middle ground and, frankly, a lot of shouting. These tensions are often accompanied by seeming unwillingness of many people to listen to one another openly. Most recently, we've seen this in challenging community discussions about housing and development, where on the one hand, some who support affordable housing are seen as supporting development without limits, while at the same time, those who support environmental protections are seen or characterized as overly privileged and blind to the suffering of others. And so to the question, candidates, what will you do if elected to overcome polarization amongst islanders and build a middle ground that encourages listening, understanding, and the development of consensus on the issues that matter to our community? So as the speaker order says, I'll be starting this with Gary Gagne, and I will be, maybe we can get the spotlight on him now. And I will start the clock for you now, Gary. Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute, Gary. We'll get better at this as we go along.
I thought I would.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to reset your clock. Start again. That was us. Okay. I'm going to be starting the clock now. Oh, you're muted again. Oh, there you go.
I can't unmute.
You're on, he says you're on mute.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I think I've lost some time there. Given my nature as a peacekeeper and problem solver, I will remain flexible to deal with issues as they arise. I bring my experience in conflict resolution to the table. I've had quite a bit of training and practice in Gandhian-style nonviolent actions in Clayoquot Sound and elsewhere, which also involved meeting with loggers and their families to discuss our differences and shared values. Marshall Rosenberg, originator of nonviolent communication, had great success finding consensus even among warring parties. I am committed to further developing these skills in order to help facilitate less fractious and more productive community building. The whole focus of my campaign is to promote heart connections, connection to ourselves, connection to others, and connection to nature. We are long overdue for a course correction. Much less of this and much more of this. We need to begin a new dialogue, one that begins in the heart and expresses as respect, deep listening, and finding common ground. In finding values that we do agree on, with this, there is a greater possibility of achieving resolution. Action resonant with that resolution needs to be the follow through. I participated in a recent press meeting where the first speaker was Bill Henderson, who set a respectful and uplifting tone by bringing out his ukulele and singing, "Don't change the island, let the island change you." So let's play more. Thank you.
You got 10 seconds, Gary.
Hello, everybody.
All right, that's wonderful. I don't know if you could hear it for the other speakers who will be following Gary. I will intervene at 30 seconds. I noticed that I wasn't heard at that point, but that's okay. We'll get better at this as we go. Now, the question is in the chat window for the benefit of viewers. Elisa Poole, you're the next speaker. I will start. Oops, I just shut off my timer. So just give me a second. I shut off by mistake. All right. And you need to.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. And you may start now.
Okay, so we're talking about polarization, which we've had a lot of on this island, and I can still remember the battles over putting the Gagne sewer in the 70s, and then there was a corporation, many development battles since, and now housing is a big issue. Passionate disagreement, I think, comes out of fear that we're going to lose something that we value, or we're going to not be able to have something that we want or that we need. And I think if we think of each other as adversaries, that's not always the best way. We think of each other as people who are vulnerable and a little bit afraid. Then we humanize the whole discussion a little bit better. A lot of disagreement gets worse because we don't have enough information, or we have too much misinformation. So one of the first things we need to do is make sure everybody is informed with all the information they can have in a clear, transparent way, nicely summarized, so you're not reading 50 pages. And then we have to get together and be on our different sides, if that's the way it is, but agree on something. And I think one of the interesting things is that oftentimes when you start talking, you realize that you agree on a lot more than you thought you did. And that is a wonderful and pleasant surprise. If that's not so easy to do, you can call on a facilitator sometimes, and that facilitator can make it easier for people to understand the different roles of different agencies, figure out costs, solutions, trade-offs, collaborations, who you need to work with. And if it still doesn't work, you can sometimes reframe your question so that it's coming at you from a slightly different perspective. And I see I'm just 2 minutes away. Thanks.
Right. Thank you, Elisa. I'm going to reset my clock, not get rid of it this time. And I'd like to welcome Jenny Mclean. Please spotlight Jenny Mclean.
Hi.
And you may start.
Whoa, I'm pretty dark here. I'll fix that for my next one. I'm interested to figure out if the question is more about how people who live on Salt Spring without political positions disagree with each other, or how the levels of government don't necessarily work together. There's things I can say on either side. There are things getting done here. Like when I see, say, Ariane here tonight, I remember seeing her sitting in a circle 4 or 5 years ago at Lions Hall working on a housing communication that people were having, and people were really listening to each other. And since that time, I have seen housing projects that have gone on here, and they've been really successful. Like there's people that I know who are housed now who weren't able to have housing before. So there have been some really positive things going on here with people working together. There is willingness to liaise between people involved with the Islands Trust and people involved with the CRD. There is some planning that goes forward without working with everybody, and that causes people to feel like they have to maybe raise their voice and shout a bit louder. So it's not just about people listening to each other, it's also about the elected officials really trying to take the time to listen to the people, so that people don't feel like they have to show up and make a loud presentation or something that's argumentative.
30
Thanks.
seconds.
I'm done. Thanks.
You got 29 seconds, 23. No, okay, great. Thank you very much, Jenny. Now, if we could spotlight Ben Corno, I'm going to reset my timer. Just give me a second. And welcome, Ben Corno, and please start now.
I've had a consistent focus on leading exercises that foster goodwill and begin with the challenge of achieving shared successes. To me, that means engaging consistently in public consultation and conversations with multiple stakeholders. In short, to be an optimistic and kind collaborator. Mood is everything for me. Bringing a mood of compassion and curiosity is contagious, but difficult at times to adjust to. We're very used to these sorts of forums devolving into conflict around why something can't happen, or picking our ideas apart to look for the flaws. Those are important features of good discussion and are important to the creative process. However, this has to be done carefully and humbly. Important big tent issues alarm people because we live in a yes-no kind of world. Things are voted yes or no. Incorporation, proportional representation, bylaw 530, all these issues come down to a moment of yes or no, and then become the new law of the land. But the majority of the shared energy goes into policy analysis, brainstorming, writing and rewording, hopefully public consultation. This is the work that can close the gap between yes and no. Everybody should commit to try to meet in a place that brings us closer to a more desirable outcome for more people. This is the essence of democracy, and it takes a lot of patience to get closer to that place. Most people live somewhere in the middle, I think, and it can be an uncomfortable place to bargain from because you find yourself wanting it all. This is a brave position, but we have been talked into a place of this being wishy-washy or fantasy or uninformed. I think polarity is the byproduct of inaccurate language. We need to be more considerate of how we use language in public forums and ask more of ourselves to define people by how they act and not how they seem to be. A lot of our venues, the exchange, social media separate us from accountability of being good faith communicators, and they shelter us from the immediate harm of rebuttal. The anxiety is lower, though not without some chemical payoff. It's a safe space to make socially risky communications. I hope to inspire a change in communication in the trust that places more importance on education and stimulating discussion in our community so that we can look less to the secondhand interpretations and hyperbole of social media. I hope to have a close and open dialogue with our local newspaper so that accuracy and accountability can be found in its reporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. You guys are doing great on time. I'd like to invite Aaron to bring Kylie Coates up to the screen, the spotlight. And I'm going to reset my clock. Give me one moment. Write to Zoom about this one and make it a little easier. And you may begin now, Kylie.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kylie Coates. We used to, in the past, we used to come together as a community, as a group. We used to enjoy the town and the amenities of Salt Spring and the other islands. It taught us to work with our neighbors, and it taught us to respect our neighbors. In the recent time, in the last 10 to 15 years, the island has grown more separate, more apart, with new people arriving. The kindness of the neighbors and other things have simply disappeared. We need to come together, have more public events, start enjoying our community and enjoying our island like we did in the past. And that's basically all I have to say about this. So,
thank you, Kylie. All right, I'm going to reset my clock, and if we could bring Laura Patrick to the spotlight. And Laura, you may begin now.
All right. It has been a source of great frustration for me that the Islands Trust does not do a good job communicating with or listening to the community. This function has never been properly resourced. The responsibility for sharing information with the public and getting feedback defaults to the planning staff, who are experts in land use planning, not public engagement. Back before the task force was started, we had recommended a public engagement plan be developed and implemented that included such things as focus groups, community workshops, idea generators, and inviting inspiring speakers to explore the art of the possible. But it didn't happen. Listen, if we're going to work together as a community, bridge our differences and find the things we can agree on, we need to be able to talk to each other, exchange ideas, and find common understanding. And this has to be done face to face in a respectful manner. Through a deliberate dialogue process, we can bring all the community's voices and perspectives to the table to listen and to learn to each other. Only when the issues are better understood and framed in a meaningful way, and when the engagement process is transparent, can Islanders trust that their input will have an impact on decision-making. If elected, I'll bring forward proposals to move the trust organization to using public engagement best
30
practices with modern day approaches. I'll also fight for the allocation of the appropriate resources to communicate with and engage with the community in a clear and transparent manner. This means every project has to carve off some of its budget to ensure clear communication with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Awesome. You guys practiced, I can tell. Okay, so I got to reset my little clock here again. And I think Aaron Ann, you know who to spotlight. Gary Holman. So Gary, if you could please start now.
Yeah, hi, Brian. Yes, there I am. Well, first of all, thanks to Transitions and Salt Spring Solutions for sponsoring this and for your very important role in the community. I do think we should recognize, and Elisa referred to it actually, the history of Salt Spring. We're a very engaged community, and what comes along with that sometimes can be some polarization and serious disagreements. Elisa reminded us about the sewer debate. Incorporation has been very controversial. That's why I'm proposing the local community commission as a way to improve governance without some of the downsides perceived by the public as incorporation, the impacts on the trust, taking over a very poorly built, maintained road system. And it would also bring the CRD out into the open. The CRD, unlike the trust, is much more fragmented. The meetings are held with separate commissions. The director is somewhat behind the scenes, making decisions somewhat behind the scenes. And a local community commission would improve that greatly. I would ask people to consider my record. I ran against MLA Olson, beat him the first time, lost the second time. After I lost the election in 2017, I immediately began to work with him on the proportional representation referendum that Ben Corno
30 seconds.
referred to. So I think I've demonstrated that I can work with anyone as long as the conversation is respectful and constructive. I would cite as an example of that the work I did with the fire district to help fund the new fire hall, win the referendum, and acquire the Ganges Fire Hall for $1. And that was achieved through collaboration among elected officials. That, I think, is the key.
Great. Thank you, Gary. That's great. Good following time. A couple seconds over. Now, if we can bring Jamie Harris. I think Jamie and Harris and Don Marcotte are on the same screen together. I'm not sure if that's the way things will remain. But I've got Jamie Harris first in order here. So let me get my clock reset.
Well, Don's going to take question one. We've put these answers together here. So we've got 4 answers. Don's going to take 1 and 3, and I'll do 2 and 4.
Wonderful. Okay, excellent. Well, Don, take it away.
Okay. The question assumes there is unnecessary polarization. If any group of people complain about an issue, for example, bylaw 530, the Vortec application, Ganges boardwalks, or Bullock Lake colleges, etc., there will be polarization. What we will do is work as fast as we possibly can to deliver housing that works, that workers and their families can afford preferably ownership housing that people can feel secure. We feel the majority of Islanders can unify on this issue. And that's about it for me. Thanks.
Okay.
That's good.
Thank you, Don. All right, I'm going to reset my clock, and I think we bring Jesse Brown up for the next answer to question number 1. Let's wait for. There we go. Awesome. And Jesse, you may start now.
Hello, my name is Jesse Brown. I'm running for CRD Director on Salt Spring Island, and I feel so fortunate to work and live on this unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. My leadership style is one that is inclusive and anti-oppressive, and I hope to bring this positive energy with me to the CRD if elected as your representative. I want to take a moment to cut Salt Springers some slack. Greater overwhelming forces on climate, the economy and housing, and health concerns during the pandemic have had a major impact on our community consciousnness and has led many of us to focus inward on ourselves and on our families. And these past 2 years have been hard for many of us. Spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle might call this a contraction of universal consciousness, but with every contraction comes an expansion. And now might be the perfect time for us as a community, as members of our community, to really practice empathy, compassion, and to recognize our shared humanity as well as our individual privileges when having challenging conversations. I'm concerned that another divisive referendum is currently taking place, but I do feel hopeful that regardless of which side prevails, we can continue to work together in a constructive way. I know that by really taking the time to listen and to be present with one another and traditionally sidelined groups such as newcomers and youth, we have the capacity to create a sustainable future for our community, for the environment, and most importantly, for our kids. During this campaign, please reach out. I really want to hear from you, and you can visit saltspringtogether.ca.
Thank you, Jesse. That's great. And that was question number 1. I'm now going to turn it over to Elizabeth, who's going to take question number 2.
Great. You have 3 seconds left, Brian.
Oh,
Thanks so much. And now for question number 2. As noted earlier, lots were drawn in the presence of the candidates earlier. The speaking order is posted in the chat window. For candidates' bios and other information, please see the chat window. The second question is on the theme of proactive and comprehensive planning for climate change. Land use planning practices. First, we do the preamble, just to remind you of our little method here, and then we do the question. Land use planning practices worldwide tell us that we need to plan for sea level rise in all our community planning activities. Former Trust CAO Linda Adams, who spoke earlier, outlines just such a roadmap in the land use chapter, for which she was the lead author in the Climate Action Plan. In the case of development proposals that are clearly subject to near-term sea level inundation, but allowed under our existing zoning, including development in much of Ganges and areas at the top of Fulford Harbor, this will require proactive rezoning, long-term emergency planning, and other regulatory tools which sufficiently protect public infrastructure and private property as waters rise. The climate crisis may even require us to rethink the future of our village center along with other vulnerable areas. Think of the recent fire hall referendum where rising sea levels inform the fire districts move to a higher land. This will be true for other areas that will be deemed too difficult or expensive to defend with taxpayer-funded resources from forest fires and other climate change impacts. Sadly, the grand climate change declarations made by both the Islands Trust and the CRD, despite those, this kind of proactive, integrated, and coordinated planning in the face of the spiraling impacts of climate change is insufficiently prioritized. This lack of importance gets reflected in many land use planning decisions the Trust is making today. And so for the question, given the shared responsibility over land use and development proposals, what will you, if elected, do to foster effective collaboration amongst the 2 levels of local government and the provincial government to comprehensively address climate change and its impacts on our ecosystems and communities as outlined in Transition Salt Springs Climate Action Plan, which was released last year. And we're going to start the questions off with Ben, and I'm going to try to learn from Brian and do this really smoothly. So just give me a second here, Ben, and you can start now.
Firstly, I think it's important to leverage the hard work that builds documents like Transition's Climate Action Plan, the Clean BC Roadmap, the Trust Area Plan, and the CRD Climate Action Strategy. Our working sea level rise maps have been gleaned from this exercise. So much data, projections, and guidance have been gathered and can be pooled together. We should proceed with a shared consensus on the facts that are being worked with and reiterate our shared goals. When we attend all these joint regional meetings, we need to be specific with our climate mitigation and adjustment goals. With such a big moving target, it's critical to bring the conversations back to reality, consider the scalability of our ideas to this island, and to be clear with our commitments and honest about our compromises. I'll move past rhetoric when it creeps in and force discussion towards workable solutions for our island. I look forward to assisting the CRD in their climate action plan. We have the shared responsibility of considering sea level rise across our island, and we'll need to convey our plans and needs to the larger bodies that govern us, because adjusting the layout of our villages, businesses, and residences is going to be a cumbersome plan to realize, but it's a reality that has to be lived in. The Islands Trust is going to be on the front lines of these plans through the reimagining of our changing spaces. Everybody who takes on this labor should respect the impact of their decisions and act with our changing future in mind. We're working locally here on Salt Spring, but in harmony with the Trust area as directed by the Trust policy statement and our OCP. It could be easier to grow creatively within the commitments set up by the Trust policy statement than to fixate on how to change the wording of those agreements to fit our vision. We should advocate to the province as stakeholders in the future viability of our environmental sustainability
30 seconds.
And ecotourism sector. Sustainability is not a buzzword that only applies to ecological preservation, but a concept that can be applied to any exchange-based endeavor. Although our island is not held together through shared reliance on a resource economy, we are participants in our provincial economy and stakeholders in the health of our ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I'm just going to reset my clock, and next up is Jesse. Over to you, Jesse. You can go now.
In 2019, I entered politics for the first time as a federal Green Party candidate because I was deeply concerned about Canada's purchase of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which exacerbated global warming and put the Salish Sea at risk of a devastating oil spill. I took on Heidi Fry knowing that I couldn't win, and in order to raise awareness of oil spills and climate change in general. I feel really proud of this educational campaign, and although I currently don't belong to any political party, I'll bring my green values to the role of CRD director if elected. I'm so impressed with the work of Transition Salt Spring and the Climate Action Plan 2.0, and if elected, I promise to continue the CRD's support of Transition Salt Spring and the development of an intergovernmental task force on implementing the recommendations in the plan. I agree that more work is needed across governments to make this happen. There is work that the CRD can undertake right now to reach the Climate Action Plan's ambitious target of reducing our island's carbon emissions by 50%. This includes electrifying CRD's fleet of service vehicles, making roads safer for cyclists, continuing to support local food security projects, encouraging the expansion of rainwater harvesting, and protecting our watersheds from fire and degradation. But the biggest thing that we need to do is to inspire our young people not to give up hope. While I didn't win in Vancouver Centre for the Green Party, it makes me very hopeful that I did win the student election at Elsie Roy Elementary. We need to educate and inspire youth to care through leading by example. And even though this work can feel overwhelming and hopeless, we must set an example for future generations and show that solving major problems like climate change is possible.
Great, thank you very much, Jesse. Let me just reset this. Next up are Dawn and Jamie. So if we can just get them spotlighted. Excellent, and you're ready to go now.
Hey, well, thanks Elizabeth and Brian for putting this thing together, and everyone else who was responsible for putting it together. And thanks to everybody watching. So firstly, the question seems to assume there are only two levels of local government. As Linda Adams so graciously informed us, we have multiple layers of government on the island, including the fire district, multiple water districts, Vancouver Island Health Authority, and various sub-government commissions and committees, which deal with parks and rec, harbor management, etc. When it comes to concerns over the potential impacts of climate change, the primary one, which may affect Salt Spring, and one Don and I think all of our opponents can agree upon, is the potential for wildfire. Dealing with decades of mismanagement of our protected forests would therefore be a great place to focus collaboration, not only between CRD and Islands Trust, but with the Salt Spring Island Forestry Association and the fire department through the promotion of Fire Smart, and with conservation groups and the province with respect to their unmaintained and unmanaged parkland. We are and will be committed to addressing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next up will be Gary Holman. We can spotlight Gary, and I've got the clock ready. Just want to make sure Gary's ready. Okay, and over to you, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. I hope people recall that I initiated the CAP 2.0 process with a convening of a working group, provided $15,000 in gas tax funding to help fund that plan. Also $15,000 in gas tax funding to fund the area farm plan. And I hope people will consider the things that the CRD is actually doing. A number of the things that, in fact, all the things that Jesse mentioned, good list, we're working and implementing every one of them. So we've spent millions of dollars on sidewalk and pathway improvements. We've established the Transportation Commission and our public transit system. One of the best public transit systems in British Columbia. We are electrifying our fleet. We've invested in EV chargers and the fire hall. Elizabeth, you mentioned the fire hall, as I did earlier. And through the CRD, we contributed $1 million, the single largest gas tax.
I'm going to interject and ask a future-looking question, Gary. And I've just got nudged by the team to ask you to answer into the future in the next term.
Okay, well, just to demonstrate that we're doing a number of things that have already been referenced. So we'll continue to expand public transit. We'll continue to build on our sidewalks and pathways, including the Salish Sea Trail. We did negotiate the paving of Ganges Hill with Modi, and that's going to set the model, I think, for continuing that Salish Sea Trail down to Fulford. So as with all things, there's a real need to collaborate on the water issue. I propose that the Trust and North Salt Spring get together to find ways to free up water through conservation and other measures to allow for affordable housing in or near villages, keep our settlement patterns compact.
Thank you, Gary. And I'm just going to take a moment. I appreciate your answer, Gary, but just to remind all candidates that most of these questions are future looking to the next term. And so you'll hear, that's why I popped up with Gary, but you'll hear Brian or myself do that again, just to keep everything focused. So thanks so much. Next it's Elisa. And we got her going. So over to you.
Ready to go? Well, collaboration is part of the mandate for the Islands Trust, and I think there is quite a lot of collaboration already going on, especially between the CRD and the Islands Trust. I'm remembering a statement from the Climate Action Plan, CAP 2, that said, if we're not collaborating, we're competing. And I think it's a really important thing to keep in mind, that because otherwise you have the same people asking different people asking the same people for help on the same issue. And so we need to be collaborating all together to stop that. The CAP 2 also mentions 50 different agencies with 250 recommendations that need to be put into place for us to be prepared for what's coming in the next 50 years. Obviously, that's a lot of collaborating that has to go on. So we need to familiarize ourselves with that amazing plan, for one thing, and with the organizations that are mentioned there and get them together as often as possible. One of the questions was, do we need more powers? Does the trust need more powers? There are powers already in place for zoning to deal with climate change issues, and there are going to be a lot of those as various properties that are now zoned for certain types of development become unusable for that. We were going to have to ask the province for help on that. We're going to need more powers.
30 seconds.
More powers for enforcing certain bylaws. We're going to need powers to implement the coastal Douglas fir and watershed protection areas. We would like to have maybe a provincial, it's been suggested from the governance report, there should be a provincial representative on Trust Council. I think that would be helpful. Also First Nations person. We should be collaborating with our staff a lot better, I assume, so that we follow the recommendations. And we're done.
Thank you very much. So next up, thank you, Elisa. Next up is Jenny, and I'm just going to reset while she's spotlighted. Okay, Jenny, over to you.
Okay, I'm trying to work with my low light condition here. I have seen the map that has it in red where there's expected to be a sea level rise, and Centennial Park is a bright red square. So Centennial Park is supposed to be an area that's at threat of sea level rise. And so one hand knows that that's at threat. Another hand is connected to the CRD and created the Centennial Park master plan. And a lot of money has been put into this master plan for Centennial Park when other factions know that Centennial Park's not really expected to survive sea level rise. So I think the whole thing needs to go beyond platitudes. I'm a person who took bus with kids, and I have taken it from the Grantville area back in the day when every child was $2.25. And I don't think Salt Spring has the best bus service in BC. I don't know why Gary Holman says that, because I've taken the bus in a lot of other communities and it's been a lot better. And I think that people, if they really want to talk about the bus service, they need to actually experience taking the bus, because it was a real hard sell for me going in to do delegations to the Transportation Commission to explain to those people at the time exactly what it was like and what was missing for bus service. So if that's going to be a solution for people to cut down their car use, it's really got to work. It's got to work for kids. It's got to work for families. I'm happy when the province decided that 12 and under could go on for free, and that's been great. But it took years, and Salt Spring took no initiative to do that locally. So there's just needs a lot of changes. No platitudes, please. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. And next up is Laura. So let me just reset and spotlight Laura. There we go. Over to you, Laura.
All right. The Climate Action Plan is an impressive testament to the commitment of a group of people working together to develop a plan, and it was an honor to have participated. Land use planning cuts across all the chapters in the Climate Action Plan, and inputs from numerous agencies and entities are required to inform land use decisions. I'd like to address the last comment in the context piece to this question. I can assure you that the Islands Trust is taking a more coordinated approach to addressing climate change. I've insisted that the Islands Trust partner with the Salt Spring Island Fire Rescue, the Transition Zone Ecological Research Network, the CRD, and the Private Forest Landowners Association to work on wildfire hazard reduction. The Islands Trust traditionally only partnered with environment organizations to research ecological-based practices. I convinced them that industry organizations are important partners too. Protecting the island's forest ecosystems to reduce wildfire hazards requires practices that improve the health of the forest, provide valuable jobs, and even increase carbon sequestration. The challenge we face is that the Islands Trust's own mandate requires it to work in cooperation with other levels of government, but they are not mandated to cooperate with the Islands Trust. Bit of an oversight by the province on that front. I know that to effect real and meaningful change, we must lean into cooperation and collaboration. If elected, I'll lead development of a new protocol between the Trust and the CRD, which includes coordinated community planning. I'll coordinate the previously disparate Island Trust efforts with our MLA, other elected officials and organizations to advocate to senior governments and agencies on local land use planning. I'll build respectful relationships and work in trust with the many First Nations that wish to be involved in ensuring the well-being of our islands for future generations. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. And now next up is Kylie. Okay, over to you, Kylie.
I can't see the timer. Oh. Hello there. One of the things is in Canada, we have to realize that Canadians are recycling, or at least we think we're recycling. A lot of part of it is the federal government and provincial governments are not doing what the Canadian people want. Canadians put their plastic in that blue bin, and for the most part, it ends up in landfills or in foreign countries in their landfills, and Canadians call that recycling. Now, Canada also likes to do reports and studies. Reports and studies are good in some purposes, but a report and study is not going to stop a forest fire and is not going to stop the rising sea levels. We need our country to come together and stop talking and start acting. One of the things that we can do here on Salt Spring is start by repairing infrastructure and start preparing for climate change. One is replace pipes. One is collect rainwater systems for the rainy seasons, so we have water in the drought areas or in the drought seasons. The other is start using gray water to water our parks, and the other things being is replace the lights down in Centennial Park with more environmental lights, and try and get Salt Spring to be on.
You just cut out. I'm not sure what happened.
Just lost him. Okay. We have
Okay.
30 seconds. Clock shows 30 seconds left.
I'm gonna give him a minute to pop back on.
There he is. Hold on.
Okay.
I got cut off.
Okay, we'll give you a few more seconds. Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, 30.
So right now, so right now, the #1 environmental city in Canada is in Nova Scotia. That should be Salt Spring Island, and it should be in BC. We have to be better and make sure that we get on that list of one of the most environmental cities in Canada.
Thank you, and thanks for jumping back on when you're cut off. So now it's over to Gary Gagne.
I guess I keep getting muted. As a volunteer on the steering committee Plan 2.0 and a member of the transportation working group for that update, I was involved in almost 2 years of discussion and assessment of the various data about climate change effects on the different sectors. Much of that work also involved community input on what really mattered to people and incorporating that input into the final recommendations. And as a trustee for North Salt Spring Waterworks District, I voted in favor of a motion that passed to bring the district and the Islands Trust into closer alignment in order to enable cooperation and coordination between the agencies. If elected, I would work on this type of collaboration between the trust and CRD. Given that level of collaboration, I feel we would be a much stronger voice in our deliberations with the provincial government. Currently, Salt Spring is a great pain in their sides with our fractured voices and disgruntled complaints. We can do better if we approach senior government levels of government with respect and a more unified voice. I think this would offer a greater possibility of achieving more effective prioritization of the Climate Action Plan recommendations. I would also be curious to explore avenues of CRD and Trust staff supporting each other. I don't feel we need to have municipal type governance in order to share staff and infrastructure resources. With increasing stresses due to the climate crisis, we need to find agreement amongst ourselves in order to persuade senior governments to stop subsidizing oil and gas corporations and instead using that money to help communities mitigate and adapt to the unfolding reality that we face. Thank you very much for your time.
I am just unmuted you. Do we have audio for you? Oh, weird. Okay. Well.
Okay, you unmuted me, but I think it's over to you for question 3.
Okay. Great. Thanks very much. And thanks to the candidates for answers to the questions. To question number 3, thank you, Gary Gagne, for your response to the last question. As with questions 1 and 2, lots were drawn by lottery with the consent of the candidates for the speaking order. That speaking order will appear in the chat window momentarily, along with the question. We've also got candidate bios and other information that we see periodically posted, links for those in the chat as well, or on the Transition Salt Spring website. So the third question is on the theme of climate justice, environmental protection, and climate change adaptation. For Salt Spring to take climate justice seriously, we need to pay more attention to the idea that those who were least responsible for creating the crisis shouldn't bear the greatest costs in addressing it. Climate injustice is at work when we put stringent and expensive ecological building requirements on rental housing projects, for example, or even prohibit low footprint housing like tiny homes, which is a provincial jurisdiction, while giving a free pass to mansions on newly cleared hillsides or in private coves. Locally, the North Salt Spring Waterworks District's moratorium on new development has unintentionally discouraged compact, low footprint, and more financially affordable development in the village core, while further encouraging sprawl across our forest ecosystems. The unintended consequences of uncoordinated, fragmented policy decisions like these will only multiply as the impacts of climate change and development pressures multiply. From a climate justice perspective, it is clear that those with fewer means are already suffering more, with the added unintended effects like the flight of working age people from Salt Spring and the accelerating gentrification of our community. And now to the question. If elected, how will you balance the need to protect, restore, and adapt our watersheds and forests in the face of accelerating climate change and development with the need to provide quality livelihoods and housing for working age members of our community and their families through integrated intergovernmental policymaking? In other words, how will you create positive synergies between climate justice and climate action in collaboration with the community, your colleagues at other branches of local government, and at the provincial government? Laura Patrick, can we bring Laura Patrick up? She is first in the speaking order. Can we spotlight her? And let me get my clock going. Okay, you may begin.
I'm already working on this and can give you an example. This term, I championed a new watershed protection strategic plan for Salt Spring that is prepared jointly by the agencies with primary responsibilities. Cooperation in action. Every action in the plan will be costed, assigned a lead agency, and scheduled. While First Nations are not actively participating, they are fully up to speed on it, and the plan will address how we move forward respectfully with First Nations. This is the kind of planning that drives effective intergovernmental policymaking. Regarding housing, I know Salt Springers from all walks of life want the shortage of affordable workforce housing tackled. In this term, I champion the Housing Action Program Task Force. And if you haven't read the group's recently released report, I would highly recommend it. It's full of well thought out solutions. As a community, we need to be aware of the glaring inequities in our housing stock and the impacts it's having on our society. The construction of single-family homes carries a pace, which despite a high environmental footprint faces no challenge or questioning, unlike any other form of housing that is proposed. Doesn't make rational sense, and it's not equitable. We need to bring back balance. If elected, I'll continue to work with senior government staff and elected officials. I will keep the pressure on the province to help create housing solutions specifically tailored to our rural islands, including stable and secure funding. I'll continue to work to implement the recommendations of the task force and ensure public engagement plan is designed, implemented, and meets best practices and with modern day approaches. I'll keep saying healthy people, healthy society, and healthy environment. You can't have one without the others. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura Patrick. Next can we bring the spotlight to Jamie Harris or Don Marcotte? I think it's Don's turn, if I remember correctly. I will reset my clock while Aaron makes that magic happen. And Don, take it away.
Well, again, our watersheds are already protected by 2 development permitted areas. If elected, we would work with the Conservancies, the Salt Spring Island Forestry Association, and local Indigenous to manage the forests in the watershed areas, which would improve them and safeguard these areas against wildfires. When it comes to housing, the provision of sustainable energy, efficient ownership, workforce housing in the 21st century is not difficult. All development is currently well regulated through our over 400 pages of existing standards and regulations in the land use bylaw and OCP. We feel vast majority of islanders respect the environment, are already doing their personal best to meet own targets for CO2 reductions, and do not need any further regulations to encourage them to continue their good work. Many people feel we are already over-regulated. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Don. Don Marcotte. I'd like to move on to spotlight is on, sorry, I just lost my place. Kylie Coates. And just a reminder, please do keep your answers to the questions future focused. And I will reset my clock as Aaron Ann brings up our next speaker.
I'm having some trouble here, so I didn't hear any of Laura's answer, and it's going quite staticky. So
okay, can you hear me now as I speak?
I can, but it's jaggy, so I might not be able to. For some reason, my thing keeps shutting off too.
Okay, we just lost. I'm gonna pause. I think what we'll do is move on to the next speaker. I'm gonna reset my clock and bring up Gary Holman then, and to answer that question, which is in the chat window. Gary, are you ready to? I hope you weren't in the middle of going to get a cup of coffee. Gary Holman, his clock is starting now.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Well, I think the key issue around climate justice is finding a way to create affordable housing in or near villages that are not automobile dependent. The 2 key villages there are Ganges and Fulford. And in Ganges, as I suggested before, the trust, and I really welcome Gary Gagne's overtures in that respect to get the trust and CRD together to talk about how we can deal with the water moratorium and achieve affordable housing on a no net gain in water use approach. So I've used gas tax in the past term to support Crofton Brook in securing alternative water supplies. I'll continue to do that on the CRD Drake Road property. We are negotiating the establishment of a CRD water utility for Dragonfly, also on Drake Road. And the land bank properties are going to come back into play. And in all those cases, I'll be supporting, if elected, gas tax funding to support related infrastructure, in particular water. Public transit, also a very important service that not only contributes to climate mitigation, but is also an important affordable services to provide folks. They're not as dependent on automobiles. In fact, a number of CRD services provided to folks on a low or no cost basis can provide folks with access to services, public amenities, community parks, walking trails, all at little or no cost to them. So that's CRD's role. But again, I think collaboration is the key there.
Okay, great. And that's, thank you, Gary Holman. And we're going to bring up Jenny Mclean. Please do a reminder, please keep your answers future focused on what you plan to do coming up. All right, and Jenny Mclean, you're muted at the moment.
Yes. So what I would plan to do is to work to do a lot of communication to bridge the communication gap between the people who are the ones who are working in Ganges, who are providing services, and those who are kind of in charge, who don't understand why we have so much trouble keeping staff in businesses in Ganges. And I have a lot of insight on this because I work in Ganges in a service profession, and I also have children, and I would work to resolve the huge blind spots. One thing is that we have to look at what we can do right now because we're in a crisis. So we would need to have things that happen in a temporary basis that we wouldn't necessarily want for long term, but there needs to be more understanding about tiny homes. Like I didn't know it was provincial. Other people have said it's a CRD bylaw against tiny homes because there's worries about fire risk based on if there's like a kitchen in the tiny home. The CRD believes they're being helpful, but they're not helpful because they have low flow shower heads at the pool. The water's lukewarm and it's timed. Other communities have a proper place where people can all go in for showers, and I'm not saying they have to go in for free, but they could pay like a toonie
30 seconds
and go get that service. And if they were able to do that, it would help people out quite a bit. And even things like a community kitchen, like if there's places in the States where they have people living in their own vehicles who can access like a common space community kitchen. Like we really have to look at the situation for what it is. People live in their boats and they work in town. They're not asking for like a whole new rebuild. They just need some services that complement them so that they can just keep going. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jenny Mclean. Now we'll bring up Elisa Poole. I'll reset my timer. Just wait for Elisa Poole to be sitting beside me here, and you may begin.
Okay. Well, the hard truth is that the resources are finite and they are very interrelated. So we have our main tool for protecting water supplies would be protecting coastal Douglas fir forests and watersheds. We need those water supplies protected because we can't make decisions on zoning until we know what water is available. We need to make the right decisions on zoning, and so we need the information to do that. Covenants will protect even more land, more forest land. We need to make that process a lot easier. Some jurisdictions have easier ways of doing it. It can take 2 or 3 years now to put a covenant that is secure on your property. There's got to be a way to make that easier and cheaper and faster. Water, we don't have well standards for the proof of how good your well is. I know the freshwater expert for the trust did make a very specific recommendation on that. It wasn't implemented, but we will need those standards. They're absolutely necessary. For house construction, we can do certain things. We could actually restrict the size of the house, new houses that are being built. I think we did try that back 15 years ago. It didn't happen. We could also put a much larger building permit fee on houses that are beyond beyond a certain number of square feet. We need to obviously take care of those STVRs. We need muscle to police them. We need to identify properties that might be potentially good for multi-unit housing or affordable housing. And I've talked to Ronan this morning, or emailed him, and he said, well, we haven't had the resources to look for those possible properties. Some of those might even be donation possible. Okay.
Thank you, Elisa Poole, for the response to that question. And now I'd like to invite Gary Gagne. I'll get my clock reset. And Gary, please go ahead. Oh, actually, I'm going to reset the clock because you're on mute at the moment. No harm done. Can you, I'll do it then for you.
I think it's going now.
Oh, just give me a sec. 1 second.
Go. So, Transition Salt Spring is currently piloting a very exciting project in the Maxwell Creek watershed under the direction of my superhero, Dr. Ruth Waldick. This project is working on increasing forest resiliency and fire mitigation, partly through wetland restoration with support from North Salt Spring Waterworks District. I helped to bring these two organizations together to work cooperatively on this important task, which came about as a result of public feedback that catastrophic forest fire was of the greatest concern. If elected, I will promote our local government agencies in collaboration with landowners who are willing to experiment with housing options that include small footprint living spaces combined with communal areas to more efficiently support low impact worker and family housing. Our current bylaws are being used to target and penalize those who are a model template of how to house many people with very little use of resources. This targeting needs to change to an attitude of encouragement and further study and support. As a member of the Salt Spring Housing Council, I will use my influence to persuade participants to study these options. I would also work with colleagues to persuade the provincial government to include Salt Spring in the speculation and vacancy system. Additionally, I would explore and possibly follow Seashelt and Whistler's successful approach in regulating short-term vacation rentals. I will advocate for an agency that protects both landlords and tenants equally by vetting and vouching for both to encourage long-term rentals. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary Gagne. All right, we had Don Marcotte in the list, but it looks like they're alternating. Can I get confirmation from Jamie Harris and Don Marcotte that that's what is desired? We're passing on to the next person, Jesse Brown. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. So maybe can we bring up Jesse Brown? I'll get my clock reset for second last person to answer question number 3. So please begin and please keep your question focused on what you will do. Thank you.
Okay. I'm running to represent working people and families. Ensuring we can continue to live here and support the community will guide all of my decisions if elected as your representative. Privately and on the campaign trail, I've heard so many terrible stories about people bouncing from place to place or not being able to find an affordable or secure home. I know what it's like to be a renter, and I want to use this opportunity to encourage renters to vote this election. I've heard from many that they don't believe that they can vote because they don't own land. And I want to let people know that this isn't the case. And if you're a Canadian and a Salt Spring, call Salt Spring your home, you can vote this election. I'm a proponent of eco-density, as I don't think adding sprawl on Salt Spring will reduce our carbon footprint or protect our ecosystems. We need to look elsewhere for examples of island communities facing similar challenges and find the most environmental solutions to sustain our home. I believe concentrating development in and around Ganges Village will greatly improve walkability, community happiness, and our ecological footprint on this island. We need to look at the recommendations in the water optimization study and move forward with this work in order to secure provincial funding for upgrades and look at responsibly ending the moratorium on water hookups for eco-friendly rental-only developments. Time is of the essence because we need to build attractive and secure rental developments in Ganges in order to encourage younger people to stay on Salt Spring or come here to work. I promise to collaborate across jurisdictions and party lines to promote ecologically sensitive rental developments here on Salt Spring Island.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jesse Brown. Now I just want to stop the clock for a moment, just see if Kylie Coates has returned in our midst. Kylie, you feel, let's see, I'll take a look, see if I can find him. There are a lot of people in this room.
No, I don't think he's here.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. Thank you for confirming that, Erin Ann. In that case, we will move on to Ben Corno, and unfortunately, we will have to move on to the next question after that. I just wanted to make sure, see if he was here or not. So Ben Corno, please start.
This question's preamble highlights a different challenge than the previous question. However, the second part of the question is referring to a lot of the same behaviors and commitments I outlined in the first question. Active participation in group work with the various stakeholders who are impacted by our growth. I will choose to use the rest of my time to answer the first part, which is how to balance satisfying our obligations to the environment along with our obligation to our human community. In simple terms, we cannot encourage multifamily housing solutions without accepting development somewhere on Salt Spring Island. So we have two jobs: ambitious conservation of spaces that are not desirable for high density housing solutions, and properly locating high density solutions to lessen their environmental impact. Firstly, ambitious conservation requires a front of mind approach to getting unprotected, sensitive ecosystems into conservation. I commit to increasing landowner and community awareness of both our local conservancies and the mutual benefit that comes with applying the covenant to sensitive private spaces that make up the lion's share of the island. I echo Elisa's charge that inviting a covenant needs to become easier for landowners. I believe that islanders, new and old, can see themselves becoming stewards of their own special biomes. For those spaces that lie outside of active conservation, encouraging land stewardship through digestible, informative communications similar to the FireSmart PSAs that the Fire District developed. We can also educate our community on the ways that they can tend their land to encourage its health and strengthen its supportive role in the connected ecology of our island. Regarding future housing solutions, the Trust has to identify and work with local developers, nonprofits, and housing societies to add density to our villages and close proximity areas and connect our local population with suitable, secure rentals. We have the unfortunate benefit of being surrounded by communities experiencing similar seconds, who we can look to for creative solutions that by their obligation, that look to creative sustainable housing solutions that by their obligations to their ecosystem. I think that putting the onus on developers to consider how ecologically supportive their projects could be should be our expectation, and I would expect anyone concerned about multifamily builds to ask for that. In return, the Islands Trust should be clear about their expectations and provide assistance in reaching compliance through their role in helping to secure public funds for sustainable solutions and their knowledge of best practices. Public consultation should be sought from the outset of the project and labor applied in helping both the developer and the neighboring community find a path forward that best addresses the needs of everybody. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And Corno. And I'm just going to do one more check. If I can ask Erin Ann to scroll through our list to just see if Kylie Coates has come back. If not, I will pass the baton to Elizabeth for our fourth and final question of the evening.
I don't see him.
Okay, all right. So thank you, Erin, for checking that. So I would like to hand the baton over to Elizabeth. No.
And for the last of the four questions for this evening, as with the previous three, lots were drawn by lottery with the consent of the candidates. The speaking order is posted in the chat window. For candidates' bios and other information, please also see the chat. I will remind, even though this question really inherently probably negates this, but that we're looking for future looking answers. And that works well for this one since the theme is community vision. And the question is, what is your vision for Salt Spring Island in 50 years, given the significant interrelated challenges facing our region and the globe? What does our island look like in 2072? How do you propose we get there under your leadership? And for our first, we'll hand it over to Jamie or Dawn. So let me just cue this up. And if you guys are good, let's start now.
Great. Thanks for that. Great question. So if elected, we will work as quickly as we possibly can to address the workforce housing crisis we are experiencing right now. So 20 years, 50 years, 75 years in the future, what would we like to see? Well, anywhere in the future, we'd like to see an island where we would have the same diversity of community incomes as we have now. We would have the same diversity of community interests like music, art, hobbies, sports, charitable organizations, etc. There would always be young families who have an opportunity to purchase their own homes and jobs to support their families and the community. All of that starts with the provision of adequate workforce housing at long-term sustainable prices, ownership and rental. Other communities like Whistler or Tofino, for instance, have made great strides in accomplishing that for their community. We can do the same here, and if elected, will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next up is Jesse Brown. Spotlight Jesse. And now.
My vision of Salt Spring in 2072 is a place where working people and families don't have to worry about housing, don't have to worry about the cost of living, and don't have to worry about the climate crisis. Yes, this is a fantasy, but as leaders in our community, we need strong vision with a sense of purpose and hope to guide us, not just short-term planning and crisis management. If I'm alive in 2072, I'll be in my late 80s, and I would love to see my stepdaughters feel confident to live on Salt Spring as working professionals, maybe moms, or feel safe enough as mixed race women to run for mayor of an incorporated Ganges Harbor. Fantasy again? Yes, but as I previously said, we need to inspire young people, and this only happens through their witnessing of our actions, behavior, hopefulness, and encouragement. I'll end by giving you all some homework. As someone who attended this event, you are a community leader who is engaged and keeping our community strong. Last election, only 38% of eligible Salt Springers cast a ballot. So please reach out to your friends, loved ones, neighbors, and younger people in your lives and encourage them to take time to register, learn, and vote. Once again, my name is Jesse Brown. I'm running for CRD Director, and you can learn more about me by visiting www.saltspringtogether.ca. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse Brown. And next up is Elisa Poole. Oh, you're on mute, Elisa, and you're not spotlighted yet. Let's just wait. Okay, and now.
Okay, well, 50 years is a long time, and we can't control everything. We know we can expect some serious storms, some heavy droughts, some very hot weather. Let's hope we weather all of those things safely. And I think the next decade or so is going to be essential for making sure that we can make it safely for another 50 years. So all the things we've already talked about in terms of water, water supplies, saving Douglas fir forests, these things, we will have done everything we can do by then in the next 20 years. We need to have that in place. We will have probably a population, a sense that our population is, as it cannot go much further on Salt Spring in 10 or 20 years. We will not have a lot of room for development. We will hopefully have put developments in place for housing. There will be new, cheaper technologies to allow this to work better. Heat pumps, solar, all sorts of water collection systems and gray water systems. They should be practically the norm by then, as will e-vehicles, e-ferries. I am hoping that there will be some kind of government, federal government income equity by that time that will make everybody's lives throughout Canada a little bit better. We will have rezoned. We will have housing that's affordable in certain areas along transport lines. I hope to see estate planning that leaves some of these wonderful
20 seconds
along the water. They could be turned into co-ops or I don't know, townhouses. And we're going to have huge infrastructure work to do and opportunities for new businesses to move those houses off the water, to strengthen foundations, to replan Ganges and Fulford. I missed the most important one.
Thank you very much. So let me just see, we're going to move on. Thank you, Elisa Poole. We're going to move on to Laura Patrick. And okay, over to you, Laura.
If we continue under the status quo, Salt Spring will rapidly become a place that is only preserved and protected for the extremely wealthy. This is unacceptable. I have great hope for a future for Salt Spring that has a diverse demographic and population that is thriving and resilient. I must have hope for our children and their children. We can make good decisions now in partnership with the community and First Nations. We have the power to reduce our environmental footprint, adapt to climate change, and ensure societal and ecological well-being of the island for future generations. I see future Ganges, Fulford, and Vesuvius as compact, walkable communities and linked to each other and Vancouver Island by public transportation. This will have happened because we directed compact, environmentally sensitive development to these areas and invested in water, sewer, and power systems that were designed to withstand the changing climate. By doing this, we can preserve and protect more of our forests, forested hillsides, and fragile foreshores. Change is inevitable, but how we respond to it will determine Salt Spring's future. I have the proven leadership that can build the constructive partnerships with provincial and federal governments to access funding and support, establish better coordination and working relationships with the Capital Regional District and First Nations, and listen and learn from all Salt Spring residents, including environmental
30
groups,
seconds.
artisans, farmers, small business owners, retirees, long-term residents, newcomers, and our youth. I have proven that I can work with people across the political spectrum to achieve meaningful progress for Salt Spring. Together, we can constructively and collaboratively make progress in a sustainable and equitable way. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura Patrick. And just resetting the clock. And up next is Gary Holman.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. Well, 50 years from now, I won't be here, but I assure you that I will be haunting you if things don't unfold as I hope. I would like Salt Spring, the look of Salt Spring, the protection of natural values, the rural nature of our community. I hope that's intact 50 years from now. CRD can play a role in that by through parkland acquisition, but also building affordable housing that deals with the water issue in our villages, particularly Fulford and Ganges. I do think that the land back movement with First Nations can also play an important role in stewarding our crown lands. There should be co-management in CRD parks. I would like to see the CRD parks levy taken over by the Islands Trust Conservancy. I think the trust has an ethic that's closer to our aspirations here. We should be producing much more food locally, and my support for the route and the composting facility will continue using gas tax funding. We should be disposing of our liquid waste on island instead of shipping 95% water off island, perhaps even the composting of our liquid waste. We need to be reducing water, and through collaboration with the Trust and North Salt Spring, we can definitely achieve that. We can survive on much less water use, and we need to do that if we're going to keep our settlement patterns compact. We definitely should be using the very highly treated water in the Ganges sewer plant. That would be part of that. The Sailor Sea Trail would be completed. We'd have public transit that extended to every settlement area on Salt Spring. That transportation would be electrified. Our buses would be electrified. And we need to secure funding from senior governments.
Thank you very much, Gary Holman. And the next candidate is Gary Gagne. Gary, are you ready to go? There we go. Here.
So I don't really have a vision for Salt Spring in 50 years. There's way too many variables in the equation. Keeping large tracts of healthy forest is essential. What I do expect is much more development pressure as large areas of the southwest of the United States become uninhabitable and people and folks move north. As these southern areas become unable to grow the vast amounts of food currently produced, our food sources and food security become a huge dilemma. As an example of what can be done, Cuba went through this process in the early 1990s. After the breakup of the USSR, when imports of fuel and agricultural chemicals collapsed, for a few years, Cubans struggled and starved. Permaculture experts from Australia began teaching and organizing farmers to grow food organically and to restore the badly abused farmlands formerly used for export crops. Today, the Cuban farmer is one of the most highly respected and best paid people on that island. We need to learn from them. From my perspective, unless we find our way back to the garden and nature in general, life will become much more tenuous for all of us. If we could imbibe and celebrate the ancient ways of Indigenous people who hold all aspects of nature
30 seconds.
as precious and sacred, we would have a much greater possibility of survival and a healthy return to sanity in a heart-centered world. If we can return to a heart and life-centered approach, we have a very good shot at not just survival, but joyful living and deepening relationships with all beings of nature. Thank you and good evening.
Great. Thank you very much, Gary Gagne. Our next speaker, Jamie and Dawn, have already gone. So it's Ben Corno. We can spotlight Ben. And over to you, Ben.
Okay, we have connected all of our parks and conservation areas to the extent that we can. One can walk or bike from Vesuvius to Fulford on a purpose-built path that utilizes our parks, arterials, and private land to keep it safe and speedy. We've successfully integrated First Nations culture and historical influence into our village designs, architecture, and communications. Wasanich peoples are living on Salt Spring Island in greater numbers, and their impact on our community is normal and priceless. Public transit is scheduled around the activities of commuting islanders and supports a car-free existence for everyone if they choose. Charging infrastructure is commonplace, and we've solved our parking issues in Ganges with vertical parking that pays back into our community. Park and rides allow visitors to park outside Ganges and bus into town reliably. There's a boardwalk that allows you to walk from Marina at Mobies to Ganges, and there's a statue of Matt Steffich at the end of it. There's a night market at least once a week in Ganges that features live music, local artisans, and hot food. The trees that are in Centennial Park are still there, and there are 200 more trees in Ganges as tall as those ones are today. Ganges has matured further up Rainbow Road and has grown around Central. Fulford has become a proper village, and the ferry parking no longer impacts the safe access to the village. Vesuvius has received similar attention as Fulford, and Fernwood has become a village and has been hosting multifamily community complexes for 40 years. These builds have demonstrated a commitment to sustainability that's become a blueprint for other communities our size with our challenges. There's still no traffic lights on Salt Spring Island, but speed calming has made our villages safer, and button-lid pedestrian crosswalks pepper our main drag. People are still jaywalking outside the old fire hall, which is now the site of the Saturday Farmers Market and has been for 45 years. Salt Spring benefits from more mixed-use agriculture facilitated through successful on the part of the Farmlands Trust, transitioning many hectares of land out of hay production and putting them into food production. Shared resource purchase and distribution for farmers looking to cooperate on materials purchases is an institution. Our local green spaces are thriving due to intentional land tending, motivated by local nonprofits and guided by First Nations. Native species are spreading on their own, and we're seeing the visible greening from moisture retention. Salt Spring residents have been taking part in this land tending for 50 years now, and it's an annual ritual to tend the land around the residences, replant native species, and cooperate on the land tending of our public forests. We have on-island nurseries, regional specialists in the production and distribution.
Sorry, we had to cut you off, Ben. Thank you for that. And we are going to move on to Jenny Mclean. And are you ready, Jenny?
Yes. Born on Salt Spring in Ganges over 50 years ago. So I've actually seen Salt Spring in another time, but I've also seen it in a lot of possibilities. So I think that when people are thinking about Salt Spring, it's difficult for people to not feel limits on their imagination based on what they see right now, which is making Ganges a certain way. But because I've seen it be different, I know it can be different in the future. And for my vision of Salt Spring, I mostly think about Ganges because it's a very important place for all of our needs to be met. Like people come in for their shopping, for recreation, social events, arts. I've seen Ganges be a place where children could walk and be safe. And that's a vision for bringing that back. I like that Ben Corno mentioned about the trees in Centennial Park. Those trees were deliberately meant to be miniature. So they're actually the same size they were my entire life that I remember. But I think that's really great that there was a vision to plant those trees, just like I see trees being planted right now on the fields around the edges in the school. And one thing that used to happen on Salt Spring was that people ate more local. They had local meat, like in the butcher shop in Ganges, it was a local beef that would be hanging there.
30 seconds.
Okay, and we know that oil and gas from transport freighters are a big problem for climate change and for use of oil and gas and for ocean pollution. So I'd like to see Salt Spring take the lead with growing some of the great things that are going on right now. There's families right now running farms and creating food, and I'd like to see that in 50 years, like really a big defining part of Salt Spring.
Thank you very much. And I'm just gonna ask one more time if Kylie is here. I don't see him. Does anyone else see Kylie? No. Then unless I've missed anyone, that concludes question 4.
Thank you, candidates.
Thank you.
And thank you, Jenny, for being the last respondent to that question. And sincere, like heartfelt thanks to all of the candidates. And I'm sure I speak for everyone when I thank all of you for your commitment to this community, which is very obvious in what you said tonight. I would like to, on behalf of Elizabeth and both of our teams, to really wish you all, regardless of the outcome, that you have the physical and emotional support you need to support your run in this campaign. It's not an easy thing. So thank you for your commitment to this beautiful island and its peoples. That was a lot of information to take in, and I really hope that it was helpful to the what, 175, I think we topped at about 180 people, plus the others who were on the couch with you watching in your jammies at home. I really hope it was helpful. Thanks as well to Linda Adams for her primer on local government. Before we close, we would like to highlight the two organizations that produced tonight's event. I want to start with expressing my tremendous respect for co-host Elizabeth Fitzgerald and the folks at Salt Spring Solutions. They are doggedly pursuing many issues that matter in our island community. Getting the Sailors Sea Bike Trail completed on Salt Spring, addressing housing, along with collaborating with the CRD and our wonderful Salt Spring Foundation on the purchase of lands on Mount Maxwell. Once completed, this purchase will create the largest contiguous piece of forested land on the Gulf Islands. For more on how you can support their great work, go to saltspringsolutions.com, the address for which is posted in the chat window, or better yet, do like I did and consider making a tax-deductible donation to the Community Park campaign. That link is also posted in the chat.
Thanks so much, Brian. The respect is quite mutual. It was a pleasure to collaborate with the incredible Transition Salt Spring team on this evening's event. I want to acknowledge the considerable staff time and volunteer time and advertising costs that Transition Salt Spring put into making this happen. I got to kind of like show up. So I really appreciate it. It's such a service to our community. It may look easy peasy from the other side of the screen, but that's because there's been so much hard work and coordination in the background. I encourage everyone to become familiar with the exciting initiatives Transition Salt Spring is leading, such as their groundbreaking work with the North Salt Spring watershed to restore lands from around Maxwell Lake and Maxwell Creek to make this forested source of potable water more resistant in the face of increasing climate threat. They're also offering rebates and rainwater catchment and clean water or cleaner stoves and heating equipment rebates to their Highland Climate Action Coach program. So please check that out. To support their amazing work and more public events like this one, go to transitionsaltspring.com, conveniently in the chat, and sign up for their monthly newsletter. Please also consider supporting this important work by becoming a donor.
Please do. And in closing, a huge special thanks to our wonderful event techie, Erin Ann Harper, who made all this Zooming happen like magic. I think we were not cooperative with you on a couple occasions with fruit flies and clocks and whatnot, but thank you for stewarding us. And I also like to thank my fellow director, Patty Burrell, for working with Elizabeth and I to organize this event. Also, as we get close to the end of the On the Rise 1 month long festival, I would like to give my sincere thanks to Darlene Gage, who's just wrapping up organizing a whole month long of content with our partners, Salt Spring Arts and Graffiti Theater. The festival ends with the annual Pride Dance put on by diverse and inclusive SSI Daisy at the Farmers Institute. For tickets and more information, there's a link in the chat, and I'll be there directing traffic. See you on voting day, Saturday, October 15th. There are links on how to vote, where to vote, that are pasted in the chat, accessible through our webpage as well. Thank you for the generosity, all of you, for your attention tonight to the candidates. We are all grateful you came, and I'm grateful to you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. It's been great working with you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, everyone.
And good night, everybody. Take
Good
care.
night.
All the best. Get good sleeps, you candidates. You got a lot to do in the next few days.